We often think about Genesis as the first book of the Bible as the beginning of written history. When we really look at the book of Genesis, we see that it is a collection written by Moses around 1400 BCE, and the stories that are included in Moses's history of the people were stories that took place from 4000 BCE to about 1800 BCE. So the stories that Moses wrote down for us were things that happened up to 2,500 years before Moses. So these stories that Moses wrote down for us were the stories that had to have been passed down for generation after generation after generation after generation. I can almost see families sitting around the fire and families telling these stories to their children. You know, century after century after century, they were passing down these stories so they would understand who their people were and where they came from. When we look at the stories that are included in the book of Genesis, however, there's just a subset of those stories that we actually use to teach our children. If you look at Sunday school literature, the stories that we use and quite often retell from Genesis are a few of the stories. If you actually look through the whole book of Genesis, there are some stories in there that as you're reading this, I don't remember that. Or, that's really weird. That's really bizarre. In reality, if we took the whole book of Genesis and made it into a mini-series for television, we probably wouldn't let children watch it because there are some things in there that's like, yeah. So really, when you look at a lot of the Pentateuch, the 5 books of Moses, there are some things in there that, we're really not going to spend time on that with our children. You know, some of the stories that were passed down around the giants being created from earth women and some of the angels of heaven who were overcome with lust, things like that. Pretty interesting stories in there. So when we're looking at the book of Genesis, or the beginning, these were stories were recorded by Moses, thought to have been passed down through families after over 2,500 years or more, even periods of time. And even from the time of Moses to today, that's another 3,500 years from now. So we're talking about things that happened up to 7,000 years ago. And as early as, let's see, 1800 before and 2000. So that's almost between 4,000 and 7,000 years ago, when these stories that we read about in Genesis were likely to have happened. To me, the most important thing we need from Genesis is to know and understand that it is a written record of what the people at that time believed to be their story. And when we get further along in the collection of stories in the Bible and we get to the need for God to send Jesus to earth to clarify where the people had gotten things wrong, it's very important for us to understand what it is the people at that time believe to be their story and their history. And so that's why it's important. So as you read and study Genesis, I challenge you to keep a couple of lists while you're studying the book of Genesis. One of those lists, make a list of the things that surprise you. Like, what? What does this say? Maybe even make a list of the stories that you're not familiar with. Like, I don't remember that. Because there's lots of things in there that I promise you your Sunday school teachers did not teach you. Also, make a list of your questions. What questions do you have? It's not all that important to me, living in 2025, that everything in the Old Testament here is a factual historical record, or if it's a historical record of what people believe to be their history. It really doesn't impact me one way or the other, whether it's all exactly factual or it's a collection of writings that shows me what people at the time believed. Neither of those things are critical to my faith. The things that are critical for me and my faith, I find in the writings of Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, James, the Acts of the Apostles, 3rd John. Those are the ones that are critical for my faith. Book of Genesis, written about 3,500 years ago, and was recording things that happened 4,000 to 7,000 years ago. The book of Genesis, first book in the Bible.